Namaskar, I'm Ashok Vyas, and Insight Tonight with Ashok Vyas is a program where we try to learn how the time is shaping events as well as the potential impact which we are likely to find at our doorsteps. And we're talking about new world order as well as new India. And in the light of a lot of latest developments, including what we would have liked to have seen the end, but Russia Ukraine war continues, and a couple of issues related to Indian politics. But I have the distinct pleasure and honor of welcoming someone after a very long time who is Vibhuti ji. Vibhuti ji, welcome.
Namaste, sir.
तो
Namaste to
नमस्ते
you,
विभूति जी, स्वागत है
to
आपका.
you and all the darshaks of ITV Gold.
So I want to repeat that you are not only a good speaker, you articulate issues well, you write also. And you have presented several TV shows as well as your Jaipur dialogue is connecting with a lot of viewers. Now, let us connect with the situation that we have in the world, which is causing concern for everyone looking at the images coming from Ukraine. So, where do you see the end? Do you see it happening soon or no?
I hope it ends soon. Like we can only pray. The things are not in our control. But as you rightly mentioned, Ukraine is a matter of great concern at the moment. And the things are not looking good. Games are being played at the very highest levels. And as a result of which, what has worried me a lot is the way the Western countries and NATO are responding to the whole crisis. Everybody deplores the heinous attack that has happened on Ukraine. So there is no way anyone in his right senses can justify the killings, the refugee status, the killings of people, the attack, the destruction of Ukraine the way it has happened by Russia. However, one has to also take into account the Russian point of view as well. And as we are journalists, we do TV shows and we talk about issues that confront us. This has become a real challenge because, as we know, Russia and Ukraine, they supply a lot of food stuff to the rest of the world. So how many people knew that Ukraine was one of the biggest suppliers of food? The thought that came to my mind that a small country like, relatively speaking, small country like Ukraine is supplying the food, and people are talking about food shortages happening around the globe and food crisis happening around the globe.
So
So,
let me just interrupt you and like
yeah,
a child wondering on the situation that is unfolding in the world, one would think in a civilized society and the kind of technology and the connectivity which we have with world being a family, as we say, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, we would have thought that if Putin was thinking of doing what he did, was there no way that some group of leaders, including maybe at the initiative of United Nations, should have preempted these steps? Do you think there were any attempts made? We frequently heard America mentioning that Russia is likely to attack Ukraine, which means it was not hidden. It was kind of known to the rest of the world through the eyes of America also.
so that is the precise question that I was coming to. The fact that when everybody knew that Russia had one demand, and that demand was, don't bring NATO at my doorstep by bringing Ukraine into NATO. So remember, the breakup of USSR that happened led to many countries becoming independent in that part of the world, and several of them joined NATO. So NATO has full right to extend its boundaries and its authority and its military hardware at the doorstep of Russia. So, as an American, we all want America to succeed in its foreign policy, no doubt about that. However, the success can happen only if we understand the enemy as well. So if we knew that Russia was intending to attack, obviously not enough attention was paid to the Russian consideration that give me an assurance that you are not going to bring Ukraine into NATO fold, which will lead to NATO war machine coming at the doorstep of Russia. And to prevent that, Russia realized that Ukraine was not a member of NATO. So even if Russia attacked, NATO could not step in. So it became a political gameplay, diplomatic gameplay, and war is definitely the last resort anybody would like to go to. So Russia is suffering the consequences of its attack through sanctions and everything else. But I would have thought that since we know that war does not solve problem, it leads to killing of innocent people, the global leadership of NATO and America would have done something more in terms of assuaging another nuclear power which was hell bent on making sure that Ukraine doesn't become a NATO member.
Yeah.
So,
So we will.
and historically,
Mhm.
historically, NATO and America had given assurance to Russia that it will not happen. So obviously, there is much more gameplay going on than you and I know, or we know under the belly that the transactions happen. But what is worrisome here is that Ukraine is demanding weaponry. The NATO people are talking about supplying weapons. But think about it from a perspective that are we trying to Talibanize Ukraine now? Because there is historical evidences that Russia lost the Afghanistan occupation because America and the rest of the world created Taliban to fight Russian army, and they lost because there was a massive backup and military hardware pumped in there to defeat Russia. So Russia made sure that this time none of them could come in. And by supplying weapons to Taliban, to Ukrainian people, we are virtually Talibanizing Ukraine now. So what
So
are we going to
yeah.
have?
So
Are
let
we
me
going to
interrupt.
have
Yeah.
are we going to have Taliban military guerrilla experts to come and train Ukrainians how to defeat Russia? This is a very serious development. And if you have a Talibanization of Ukraine, guess what? Rest of the Europe can't be far away then. It is a problem area. The third element, which is very, very important to remember, that in this modern era today, the very existence of NATO as a military alliance, let's remember that. NATO was established post Second World War to contest and stop Russian expansion into Europe. And Europe had its own CENTO, Central Treaty Organization. So the question is now that CENTO doesn't exist, is there a real serious need to have, NATO expanding NATO? So that is a very important diplomatic challenge. And as a member of American society, and I'm an American, I'm also looking at it that where can America begin to impact with its peace initiatives, not only through war, and then what has become a really an ugly situation here is that American president has made vicious wordplay about Putin. You know about it that
Yeah, I
he
actually
talked
wanted
about
to ask you about that,
yeah.
and let me kind of mention the rebuttal or response of Israel to what President Biden said, that Putin must go. Basically, that's what he was hinting at, which gives you that he's suggesting America wants to overthrow the current government of Russia, which might be in America's mind or in the minds of many countries. But when you say it open the way it came out of President Biden, now people are trying to say that no, he didn't mean this. So that reminded me that used to happen with Trump initially while he was campaigning. No, he didn't mean this. He didn't mean this. So somewhere, but coming back to the serious side of the whole situation, and when you look at any news channel that is showing you live images of what is happening to innocent people as well as to the buildings, and it is very difficult to build and it is very easy, or rather it takes less time to destroy. And we are seeing mayhem in several cities of Ukraine. which is painful to watch, and you feel a sense of helplessness as a world citizen. And there is no end in sight is another issue which is bothering us. But allow me also to bring to your attention that as we are talking about new world order, I think Turkey is also supporting Russia. China is supporting Russia. India is not exactly supporting, but it has taken a stand which kind of puts it in the bracket of pro Russia for the time being. So, and some people say that Russia, China, and India are on the one side. So, it looks like there is likely to be a shift in the world geopolitical system. And talk to me about your reading in terms of America's stand, America's position, and is it going to retain its position as superpower?
America will remain a superpower. That is not going anywhere. But important part is the influence of America as a mighty country, as economic power, as a political entity, as a military superpower, is going to decline. And one of the simple reasons for that is written in geopolitics that when you overdo your things, it becomes dangerous. So US has sanctioned, US imposes sanctions on Iran and other countries. India also has been part of the sanction regime at one time. People are no longer liking that anymore. That political differences lead to the suffering of innocent people because of sanction, right? So there is a very powerful agreement of treatment of POWs in the world, right? The prisoners of war, because the underlying philosophy of that is that soldiers are fighting a war on behalf of their countries. They are not responsible for the war. They are fighting a war for their country. So when you catch them, you treat them respectfully. So here, that sanction is again becoming a very dangerous weapon because America, as an American, I'm concerned. What if tomorrow China imposes sanctions on America that we will not supply any goods and services for the next 15 days? Think what is going to happen to America in that process. So, Americans, as Americans, we also need to be concerned that whatever we are doing to others, others can do to us as well. That is a scenario in NATO that Germany and Europe is dependent so much on Russian energy to keep themselves warm. So if you are looking at sanction as a tool to punish people, it is very dangerous. So like you said earlier on, that Biden made a statement that regime change must happen. He's a killer. He's an evil. So when are you going to talk to him? So if you are going to talk to him, that means you are going to talk to evil, those very person who you already called a villain, you called him a killer, you are a war criminal, and all those things without having to prove it in the court of law. So the second element is that when Biden said in Poland or someplace that sanctions were not supposed to be a deterrent, but reality is that Vice President Kamala Harris, Secretary Blinken, they all talked about sanctions being a deterrent. And President says it was not supposed to be a deterrent. Never works as a deterrent. So you have a major conflict of interpretation of scenarios. So like Biden said, Putin must go. And now the entire administration is trying to clarify, oh, he didn't mean that. So he's the president of America. Your statements matter, your words matter. So, as a result of which, now you are going to talk to the same person to resolve the crisis, whom whom Zeltsin is trying to connect with as many times, and Russians are not taking the call. So, where is the situation lying? Now we are talking about dividing Europe into north and south, east or west, as the case may be, because Russia wants to capture these areas, Crimea, Donetsk, and other
And
places.
and, and
So,
yeah, and let's look at the situation of president of Ukraine, who has constantly been in touch with European countries as well as he addressed American Congress, and he always is asking for additional help in terms of military and some advanced equipments which are not exactly being supplied, though he's being promised, and America has also extended monetary help to
I
Ukraine.
know.
But overall, the kind of support which looks like Ukraine anticipated from NATO and America didn't come to him other than the sanctions imposed on Russia, and he was also asking to sort of have a ban on his sky, space, etc.
Yes.
So there has been a kind of stand which shows lack of clarity, focus, and sustained support for Ukraine to come out of the crisis. Do you see it that way? As earlier you were mentioning, now I bring back your words where you were saying that there is some other plan, or so. Do you see any conspiracy there?
There is the conspiracy is something which always exists in any scenario. People are always there to take advantage of the scenario. So that's what is going to happen. One of the biggest considerations, one of the biggest impact of this scenario is that how the world takes on the currency and trade scenario now. That's a big challenge, because the dollar it can be challenged now, because Iran is a sanctioned country. Russia is a sanctioned country. People are talking about sanctioning China. The question then arises is that you are, on the one hand, pally with China and trying to placate it, but for the same reason, you are not punishing other countries. You are punishing other countries, not China. So that is the issue which is very important, and you are very correct. But there is every strong likelihood of India, China, and Russia, Iran, and other countries whom US is targeting in its foreign policy to form a group of their own. So think about it, Ashokji, from another point of view. There are two organized existences in the world. One is NATO, which is the Western European and America military alliance that exists, that you touch any of my 30 members and we are all will all it will be a war against everybody. And the second one is Organization of Islamic Countries. They are religion based organization. So 56 members are there, 30 here in NATO. You are looking at 90 plus countries have an organized status of their own. Rest of the world is not organized on military or religious basis. So that may trigger, and there a big role will be China, how China adjusts to India's needs, Taiwan's needs, Hong Kong's needs, and Tibet's needs, to say that, okay, we are going to have a arrangement between Russia, India, and China, and to withstand the OIC and NATO that is coming in. So you are looking at a potential of a realignment happening. If I'm thinking about that, I'm definitely sure that the big minds are also thinking about it, that how to counter these sanctions, how to counter these Western narratives. So right now, there
And
is another
yeah,
sad part, Ashokji, this needs to be mentioned. At the moment, every narrative that we are seeing on Russia and Ukraine, and I'm saying this as an awake American, that when we are conveying through our media what they are doing, do we have any option to hear what is happening from the other side? We have banned their television. We don't encourage their point of view to come on. But there is only one point: don't let Ukraine become NATO. And matter was, in my opinion, would have been resolved completely. There was no need for a war here. So
I think
let's.
that's a, yeah, very valid point. Very valid point. And looking at different point of views, India's point of view is different than America. And what America was expecting India to take a stand in the United Nations, India didn't toe that line, and it has also accepted to buy oil from Russia at some discounted rate, etc., which puts India in a kind of a different light from the prism of America and Western countries. And talk to me about your analysis with respect to India's correctness in understanding the situation and setting its position.
See, you have to remember one thing. This is a very important point people must bear in mind. This is an European territorial issue. This is a Europe plays from time to time. They like to draw their own boundaries. They try to have an internal conflict, which is then becomes a global scenario. First World War and Second World War. So many Indians died fighting to save Europe from their own internal conflicts. Hitler was one such conflict. Hitler was trying to dominate entire European continent, which became a world war because all the colonial powers brought in colonies to fight their war. Millions of Indians have lost their life there. So it is a European melodrama, if I may use that word. It's a European melodrama. They must sort out their problem. Just as we are telling the world that Pakistan India situation is a bilateral issue, no need for anybody to come here. So, this is what is important. That's the stand India has taken. And I think the rest of the world is also looking at it. Yes, there will be impact and implication. There will be ramifications of oil and other things. But when we in America talk about the American interests first, then the question arises, why shouldn't other countries take care of their interests first, right?
Okay,
And
yeah,
American,
yeah.
and American diplomats have acknowledged this fact
Mhm.
publicly, and Secretary of State and others have, many assistant secretaries have said that we recognize India's relationship with Russia, right?
Vibhuti, we are expecting another round of talk between Russia and Ukraine for peace, and
Yes,
Ukrainian president has said that he is willing to discuss his country's neutrality in order to end the war without delay. Though he also clarifies that he is not going to accept territorial integrity being attacked or compromise on territorial. So,
correct.
what is it that you think he means by saying that he's willing to discuss his country's neutrality? To my mind, maybe the stand that he has already made clear that he's not going to opt for NATO joining a NATO.
Right.
Is that what is being suggested here, or something more?
Yes, that's what he means. That's what he means, that he is happy not to be part of NATO. He is happy to be independent region in that plot, in that location. And obviously, no leader of the country will say, I'm willing to partition my country. So there will be an element of negotiation. And, God knows what is going to happen. I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen here.
That is true.
We can speculate about it. But the fact of the matter is that if Ukraine had said right in the beginning that we are not going for NATO, which America told them, which Europe told them that you are not going to be part of NATO, then why that temptation came about? This is the issue which is very important to. There was something underhand going on, that eventually we have to demolish our our arch rival Russia, and one of them is to get him entangled into Ukraine. Then we supply them weapons, we throw them out, let them suffer deaths, and just as they walked out of Afghanistan, they will go away from Ukraine defeated and demolished. But
So without yeah.
yeah,
So, without knowing all the details, as you said, we hope and pray that this war ends soon, which is not in interest of anybody
yes,
on the planet. And now let us move for a little time that we have towards India. And indeed, there was a lot of excitement about after the state elections, and in four BJP and Punjab AAP, and then this film, The Kashmir Files, has become like a movement, and people have resonated with it in a way which is unprecedented. You have seen visuals of people chanting slogans of Bharat Mata Ki Jai, Vande Mataram, and many people crying, and based on some deep research as well as events which actually happened and were not never told. So now coming to the question of the Kashmiri files and the statement of our leader in Delhi Vidhan Sabha, Kejriwal, has aroused a lot of anger among people, and there have been a gathering of Kashmiri women throwing chappals at his cutout and all that. But talk to me about your analytical take on why Kejriwal said what he said, though it was not a political forum. He was to respond to the Lieutenant Governor's speech.
see, Kejriwal आपके शो में 2014 में I had mentioned that Kejriwal is an Nautanki.
Is it? Not a
Yes, I said this in your show,
Acha.
2014. If you go back to your video, you will know that. I had said, and I had also said at that time that Modi will win because he's a Karma Yogi. Kejriwal is a very strange creature. He doesn't care two hoots about Hindu votes. He has consolidated certain segments of the vote bank, and he panders and plays to them. He knows that Hindu votes will remain divided, and he will keep winning from that perspective. And he does a political economic game of offering things for free, right? So the question here arises is that why did he do that? It is absolutely ridiculous on behalf of Arvind Kejriwalji to do what he said, to make a mockery of a genocide and expulsion, exodus that happened from Kashmir is hurting the sentiments of people of India. Now, why Kashmir Files has become a success is for the simple reason, which I have said many times on the shows and otherwise, that the news was suppressed. I was living in Delhi in 1990. No, we had no idea that so many people were running away from there. The narrative was that time was that these people did not get along. वो अपने आप से आए हैं. Nobody was told that they were given the threat of convert, leave, or die. What has happened with this movie, which I saw, I was amongst the first 300 people to see in Long Island on their US tour of conveying the message of Kashmir Files. A lot of people are now saying only one thing, that, oh my God, this was happening in our own country and we didn't even know about it. Congress party is suffering, will endure, and will pay the price of the curse of Kashmir, as I call it, the curse of Kashmiri Pandits. It has got them. Aj Rahul Gandhi says that I'm a Kashmiri Pandit and I will solve your problem. Who is he kidding? Tell me that. Who is he kidding? Who does anyone believe in him? The second question is Arvind Kejriwal. I mean, his behavior is low down dirty shame. To have mocked the tragedy in the manner that he has done, despite knowing what it has been there. The reality is that's what has united the entire India as a spectrum. That
And unfortunately, Vibhuti, in spite of the critical voices that were raised, the second day again, it was like he is putting salt to the wound. He made similar statement with some more addition. But now, in the 2 minutes that we have, I want to bring to your attention a hearing that took place in Supreme Court with respect to minority status. To, let's say, as we are talking about Kashmir, so Hindus were minority, and there are different minorities in different states. So Supreme Court deferred the hearing on this issue of granting minority status because the Solicitor General Tushar Mehta said he was not supplied the affidavit filed by the center. Now, how this affidavit comes to the press and doesn't reach where it should actually reach, that is difficult to understand.
this minority thing in India has become a joke, unfortunately. Like, how can 80%, 90%, 95% Muslims in Kashmir are deemed as minorities, whereas Hindus who are being butchered, killed, raped, and suffering the mayhem are called a majority? So minorities have a benefit given by the Minority Commission, which the governments have been doing it. But the question arises here is that if Hindus are a minority in an area, you can't take the global, that 80% population in India means that if there are 2% Hindus in some Noakhali or some other West Bengal area, they are not minorities. It has to be applied uniformly.
No, no,
Just
yeah.
just like there has to be a uniform civil code in a country you live. You can't say, like Indian American Muslim League talked about, that uniform civil code will destroy the Islamic, culture and tradition. No, it's not. It's going to protect.
Vibhuti, I'm so sorry. We
We are out
almost
of
are
time.
at the end point for our conversation. I appreciate your stimulating and thoughtful contribution as always, and you're so soft after it. We can hear it on your phone, phone too. But overall, it was helpful in understanding the impact of the new world and new order in the light of the developments that we are facing. Lots of good wishes and hope to
Thank
see
you.
you soon.
Thank
Namaste.
you. Thank you. Namaste. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So thanks to Vibhuti Jhaji and thanks to all of you for being a part of this conversation. This is Ashok Vyas. Namaste.